have termed a game changer for the region. We have three distinguished panelists for this program. Dr. Sajjadpour will probably join us a little later. So, Ambassador Hasan Habib Saab, can we begin with you?
Okay, I'll try.
Just take the time to introduce you.
Yes.
Ambassador Syed Hasan Habib is currently Senior Fellow in the Center for Policy and Area Study in the Institute of Business Management at Karachi. Although he is by training a chemist, he has had a career in diplomacy. He was a civil servant, then he joined the Foreign Service of Pakistan. He has served in various positions in the government of Pakistan in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, in the Southeast Asia and Pacific region, Pacific Department, also in China and Indochina. And he has also served in many of our embassies around the globe. He has attended many international conferences, and he has had a career in academics. I see that His Excellency Sajjadpour has joined us.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum, Sajjadpour Saab. I have already introduced Ambassador.
Please.
So can
Please.
Can he speak? Ambassador Saab, you have the floor.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Masuma Hasan. I am very honored, and my apologies Sajjadpour. I have a great respect for the topic. I'll briefly explain certain points of the accord that I feel are important as a reminder, and then how they will impact on US diplomatic and election relevance in the upcoming election. In the West, the Abraham Accord is considered to have provided a path around the Palestinian vote of Israel-Gulf relations normalization. So it is significantly a new way ahead. Why it is considered so significant while covert contacts were going on for quite some time? That is a question that we should have. Apologies to Sajjadpour. I'll first say it all started because of the perceived Iranian threat which was fed in the Middle East and in the West. It was generally perceived that the Iranian expanded threat and Iran's ability to operate from a variety of locations in the region such as Syria, Iraq, the asymmetric forces operating in the crisis spots in the region, and Iran itself created a sense of fear. So it was real as well as a fear that was propagated through the international media. One aspect of this threat is very clear, and that is the Iranian missile threat in the region. Furthermore, the 2015 Iran nuclear accord and the drone attack on the Saudi installations created a general climate of fear in the Gulf region. Their proximity to Iran gives them a limited time to react. Looking at their capabilities, it is very doubtful that in case of a real threat from Iran or the region, the Middle Eastern Arabs can react. So this accord, plus the modernization of Gulf Arab air forces, like America has agreed to give 36 new aircraft to UAE for its air force modernization, plus the working that will be created under this accord between the Israeli Air Force and Defense Forces will directly improve the response by the Gulf state to any threat. The Israeli expertise in the early warning and dealing with asymmetric threat through online intelligence sharing will further boost the Gulf regional security, at least
चली गई.
Secondly, it will be a counterbalance to the Russian rising influence into the Mediterranean region. Some experts predict that an important element in this will be the proposed route from Haifa port to the Red Sea through railway line that will create an alternate route to the Israelis to reach the Middle East. Palestine, what is in it for the Palestine? The UAE agreement urged Palestinian and Israeli to reach an agreement which would be reasonable and practical. Now, it's a very loaded sentence. Can the Palestinian give up their demand for right of return and right of the return for about 5 to 6 million children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren of the refugees of 1948? And if those refugees will be allowed to come, can Israel absorb them? So it's a very, how to say, by the way type of suggestion, which may not be of very big relevance. Egypt, Jordan, UAE, and Bahrain have signed peace agreements now with Israel, and it conveys to the Palestinian people a message that their veto is no longer valid. Means Arabs and other Muslim countries are now working around Palestinian issue and establishing relations with Israel. The Obama agreement, Iran nuclear, was disliked by Arabs and Israel, plus the American global commitments are working as, which were working as a security for Israel and the Gulf countries, are no longer, how to say, as valid as they were. So Israel is trying to create new alliances in the region, and Abraham's Accord is one of them. Regarding what Iran has to win or lose out of this situation is that the region is creating a front against Israel. Against Iran, in which Israel is a pivotal state, and other Arab states will now be seen as working. Now, in this, there is a very serious catch. The UAE has a lot of interdependence with Iran when it comes to financial and commercial dealings. Can they allow Israel to encroach into that region? That will be a very important thing to be seen. The deal reinforces the 2015 deal, nuclear deal, has reinforced Iran's position as regional power, which was very difficult for Israel and the Gulf Arabs to absorb. Now, Abraham's Accord works directly against it. That was my brief about what is in for everybody. Now comes to President Trump and USA. What is in it for President Trump? Is it a victory for President Trump? That is not the case. The current administration strategy is to sign deals and to bolster its credibility. But whether they are getting full load out of it or not, that is a big question. The previous agreement about the new peace plan about the Middle East was a stillbirth. It was also hyped as a very big achievement, and it was not. So, but with this agreement, President Trump has pleaded Israel. It has praised the country, its leader, and it has moved US embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. It has recognized Israel's annexation of Golan Heights and killing of General Qasem Soleimani, who was considered a serious regional threat by Israel and the Middle East peace plan. So and the list goes on. So one thing is sure, that President Trump is pleasing USA, the Israel, and indirectly the Jewish lobby vote will be more secured for him. It was already, but it will now be 100% surety. In terms of foreign policy, the Abraham Accord is a net win for Israel, but not for USA. President Trump has successfully further isolated Iran in at least Gulf region, and provided a formidable front against it. But it is nothing dramatic. There is no dramatic achievement in this accord because that could impact the US voter. Why? Because everybody knew that several countries were having informal contacts with USA, especially in the region. We are now also listening that Sudan may join and other countries may join. And it is an ongoing process. So in modern world, there is no dramatic issue. There are movements, there are indirect signs that were already showing that the two countries or Iran is being isolated through new linkage of Arab countries with Israel. The US voters may, the reaction may formalize soon, but right now Joe Biden is leading comfortably. The US no serious progress in trade war with China or high denuclearization of Korea does not provide any new impetus to the US and a claim that they have done something. Iran, strangely, do not pose any direct threat to US. Its regional commitments are also not posing any threat directly to Europe. Also, the regional proxies, which are blamed to be fighting on the side of Iran, are also not against US, but against the Arab monarchies. Now, it is very strange that US is fully aware that supporting Arab regimes is rather difficult in Europe and in America because of their undemocratic nature and poor human rights record. For example, the killing of Khashoggi by the Saudi agencies. These governments will find it very difficult to open up and adopt the modern systems or norms. The conservative elements will put up a lot of resistance in Arab countries. So selling Arab regimes as partners to the US public will be not an easy job, and there is hardly any time to do it now. The central issues in the coming elections would be ongoing COVID pandemic that left 220,000 Americans dead and protest over the killing of George Floyd and other Black Americans, the new Supreme Court justice, the Affordable Care Act, the unemployment, and so on and so forth. The list goes on. So the Abraham Act will be very difficult to see any positive impact or sizable impact on US election. As I said earlier, the traditional lobby is already behind President Trump, and thanks to his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, and the new Middle East plan launched earlier was also appreciated by that particular lobby. So, in my humble opinion, it is not very easy to say that it will have any strong impact on the coming election. Furthermore, if we recall that President Jimmy Carter was not re-elected in 1980 despite orchestrating the Camp David Accord between Israel and Egypt. Also, George Bush, despite liberating Kuwait in 1991, could not win a re-election 1 year later. Bill Clinton having an agreement between Israel and Jordan. So in American history, there are other issues which are more important. The American public is not very outward looking. They are more concerned about their issues. So Abraham Accord may force few, how to say, bench sitters on that side, but it will be very difficult to have a major impact on states which are not pro-Trump to adopt it. My last point would be on an international level, the world needs US leadership on several important issues, and especially the COVID-19. So it will be very, how to say, strange to predict that American public would forget all their issues, pandemic, unemployment, financial poor ratings, the trade wars, South China Sea, North Korea, Iran, and just be happy with the bronze record. Thank you very much. And now the floor is over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Thank you very much. Let me say that Ambassador Hasan Habib is fluent in Chinese. He has been a Consul General at Chengdu. This institute has a very formal and cordial relations with some international institutions in Chengdu. And Ambassador Hasan Habib has also been ambassador to a very difficult mission, to a very difficult posting. He was Pakistan's ambassador to Pyongyang, North Korea. It gives me extremely great pleasure to welcome Dr. Syed Mohammad Kazem Sajjadpour. Your Excellency, you should have been the first speaker, but we had already started when you came in. Ambassador Sajjadpour has spoken at this institute in the past couple of occasions. Currently, he is president of the Institute for Peace, for Political and International Studies, which is based in Tehran and which is affiliated to the Iranian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. In fact, his association with this institution is legendary because he has also served as its Director General in the past. He has had a brilliant career in diplomacy. He is advisor to the Minister of Foreign Affairs on strategic issues. And earlier, he was also Iran's ambassador and deputy permanent representative to the United Nations. He is a scholar. He received his PhD in political science from George Washington University. And his current interests in academia are reflected in the fact that he is editor-in-chief of the Foreign Relations Journal and also editor-in-chief of the Iranian Review of Foreign Affairs Journal, which we used to get in exchange for our Horizon, Pakistan Horizon. It is a great pleasure to welcome you again, Excellency, and we will be honored if you would address our audience.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador Hasan. It's really a pleasure to be in the meeting. I was on time, but there was a technical problem. I apologize. I'm so happy to be in your institute virtually. I have very good memories of being in your institute, a very beautiful place, especially the library. I mean, I've visited a lot of institutes around the world, but yours remains in my memory with really a very different and distinctive standing. And also the audience, the questions, and the relationship that we have with your institute, as well as the Iranian-Pakistan relationship, which has always been a friendly and will remain friendly and will be more friendly, I hope. I have to say that I speak personally, it's my personal view, and I have just my views being shared in this very interesting meeting. I think there is a question how we can really analyze this accord or what deal, whatever you want to call it. I really thought about it and I came to a type of ABC. You know, my habit of making problematic. B, betrayal by levels. And C, composition of force. And my overall answer is that it doesn't have any strategic value Show me one. And he knows it. Look, go to North Korea, go to maximum pressure. American leadership, even go to Afghanistan. He has invested so much. Do you know what will happen in next? Lots of personal hate, and he is thinking, of course, of the future personally. He has ambitions for the post-Trump era. But look, there is a link between him, Kushner, this constituency, and the vote. So why it's called Abrahamic? Because it goes to this biblical side. Furthermore, on the American side, I think there is also a problematic of American overall Middle Eastern policy. Can you tell me what the policy is? I think it's a state of limbo. There are a lot of fluctuations, and it is reflective of a very deep crisis in American global standing, including in this region. The policy of the United States in this region is very personal, based on Kushner, based on these few leaders of these small countries, and it is very polarized. And I think this is so you have to look at this accord from this perspective of American problematic, and I think it explains why there is rush. Just 2 days ago, there was a news that there is a push by Pompeo to Sudan to accept a deal within 24 hours, 84 hours of this sort. Why? Sudan. Because they want to add, oh, this is a success. I think it's not a success at all. It is just a remedy for a psychological failure, plus getting votes from a, let's say, a portion of this American constituency. B, betrayal of by level. I think we knew that there were contacts between some of these smaller states and Zionist entity in the past. So there was a betrayal in the beginning, in the past. There is nothing new. And the interactions were, especially on intelligence, on this military cooperation, on, let's say, containing of the perceived threats. And I think it was a betrayal to the Palestinian issue in the past. Now, the second level is it is becoming public. So the betrayal is now public. Who can ignore the Palestinian plight? Who can ignore it? During the last 70 years, there had been more than 60 American, European plans to just fix the Palestinian issue. But they have not been successful. Why? Because there is a real problem called Palestine. You cannot ignore it by signing these deals and these accords. And whoever is not paying attention to the plight of Palestinians, I think, is ignoring a reality on the scene, is not seeing the reality. So I think this is a betrayal, and I think the betrayal is going to be significantly impacting the destiny of those who have been in this business of betrayal. As a Muslim, as a human being, you cannot ignore the plight of Palestinians, as you cannot ignore the other plights of people in our surroundings. And I think this is very important. And you cannot by show off, by signing, by, making psychological, let's say, consultations, by electoral processes, ignore the deep fact. These refugees, now it's third generation, can they ignore their origin? Can they be permanently in a state of, let's say, uneasiness, inconvenience? They are human beings. So I think it was known before, and it is now public. And I think it is not good for them, for those who have committed this betrayal, because of the reality of the scene. Look, the Palestinian reaction of all sorts, not just one, let's say, faction or one thinking. I think the Palestinians at large look at it as a betrayal. Now let me go to my final point, which is more, let's say, more strategic in nature. That is the composition of forces. I think Ambassador, Ambassador, whom I have so much respect for him, who talked before, talked about the fear of Iran. I think fear of Iran is very fabricated. Why? Of course, Iran is on rise, no doubt about it. How? First of all, naturally, Iran is a regional power. If it's not a regional superpower, some people call it, because of the size, the population, location. Iran is connecting at least 5 regions together. Iran is not a subcontinent country, but is bordering subcontinent through Pakistan. Iran is not a Central Asian country, but is bordering Central Asia. Iran is not a Caucasian country, but is the only country bordering with Armenia and Azerbaijan. Iran is not a Mediterranean country, but is bordering with Eastern Mediterranean through Turkey. And Iran is not an Arab country, but is bordering with Arab country in the Persian Gulf and its western part. And Iran is bordering with the Slavic world through Russia from Caspian. So it's a big entity there, naturally. Furthermore, what's important, Iranian achievements during the last 40 years. And Ambassador, I'd like to emphasize this, which I think I mentioned in your institute. Iran is the only country in this region which is providing its security without any international alliances. Completely homegrown. Completely home. We defended our country during the war with Iraq. And of course, we never forget Pakistan's real support and sympathy for us during those years. But look, we are providing all our weaponry, training, whatever. We are not borrowing power from United States as these smaller states are doing. We are not dependent on what's happening in Washington. We don't have any pro-American faction in our politics. Our politics is homegrown. Our security is homegrown, and and we have a very, let's say, set of achievements in education, in medicine. We have been under economic pressure for a long time, but still we have a functioning economy. Do we have challenges like any other country in there? So I think to put this together, and we have been witnessing few collapses which have helped Iran strategically. The collapse of Soviet Union, the collapse of Saddam Hussein, the collapse of Arab security order, which was against Iran. So I think put all this together, Iran is standing. Whom we have invaded? We have been 40 years on defense. Processes we signed JCPOA. Then, because of American domestic politics, this gentleman came and said, I withdraw from this. So I think Iran is there. Iranian achievements should be understood and appreciated. There should be nobody fearful of Iran. What is the source of fear is dependence on the others. So here I would say Iran is self-confident in defending itself, its interests, and the others have either a lack of confidence in their own security, or they have overconfidence by artificial means, including this type of deals. And it would negate their own interests, I think. So I think to end, I think strategically these deals and the others, small states gathering through a big power for domestic elections would not solve the fundamental problem of Palestinian plight. It wouldn't solve the fundamental problem of regional security, and I think it would create more polarization, even among the Arab states, even among the Arab states in surrounding. And I thought at large it would be negating the interest of everybody. I stop here. I thank you. So my ABC again: A, it is an American problematic. It is for domestic consumption. B, it is a betrayal. C, Iran feels confident because of its, first of all, thanks to God, its natural position as well as its achievements, and these are nothing that can change the realities. The realities on the scene are there, be it the Palestinian plight, which should be solved by all the collective action, or be it a regional security, which requires more confidence between regional states, and nobody should be fearful of Iran. Iran is not a problem in the region, is part of the solution to any problem in this region. And I thank you, Ambassador, and your colleagues, and I hope I didn't consume more than time that I was supposed to talk. Thanks.
Thank you, Excellency. No, you didn't actually take up more time than we gave you. Thank you very much for your insightful input. And I hope you will stay a little longer so that you can answer questions.
I stay till the end, yeah.
Thank you. I would now like to introduce Dr. Tughral Yamin, who is our third panelist. Professor Dr. Tughral Yamin is the founding member and Associate Dean of the Center for International Peace and Stability. He's an army person. He has been a brigadier in the army, but he later became a scholar. And he has served a great part of his life, working life as a scholar. He has earned a PhD from the Department of Defense and Strategic Studies at Quaid-e-Azam University, Islamabad. He has worked on confidence building measures between India and Pakistan in information space. He has also got a degree in war studies and in international relations. And as I said, he has retired as a brigadier in the army. His academic interests include India-Pakistan relations and confidence building measures between our two countries, regional security, peacekeeping, peace building. You see this focus on peace. Conflict resolution, also a focus on peace. Nuclear stability, and all kinds of warfare, chemical weapons, net-centric warfare, strategic decision-making, and information security. Dr. Syed, I invite you to address our audience.
Thank you very much, Dr. Massimo Hasan, for this very kind introduction. Thank you, Pakistan Institute of International Affairs, Karachi, for inviting me. This is my first opportunity to be working with this great think tank. And as Dr. Sajjadpour mentioned, I have had one opportunity to be in your great think tank, and what impressed me most there was your library. I was really very impressed. It was a short visit. I hope I can come back to Karachi once again, which incidentally is my birthplace. Never lived there, but it is my birthplace. So I have prepared a short, and I must thank also uh, uh, the research associate Wajiha Sahiba, who reached out to me, and Dr. Tanveer Khalid Sahiba also, who continued to engage with me before this event. So I have prepared a short presentation. I hope this will bring clarity to my thoughts. So I'll just share it on screen with you. Just bear with me for a second. So it says disabled. Host, can you please enable me to share the screen with you? It says host disabled participant screen sharing. Can you please enable me to share the screen with you? The IT on the other side, anybody? I want to share the screen with you, make the presentation. Yeah, okay, there it is. So just a second, I will try to, yeah, okay. So as Dr. Masuma Hasan said, I work for the Center for International Peace and Stability, a bit of marketing for my center. We teach peace and conflict studies. We give degrees to people who are interested in peace and conflict studies. And we also train our potential peacekeepers. You would be knowing that Pakistan is one of the largest troop contributor to peacekeeping operations in the world. And one book that I wrote, and I'm very proud of it, is UN peacekeeping operations in Somalia, where my unit participated. This was the first unit in the world, 724th Regiment, which landed in Mogadishu and remained there for 1 year. And the Pakistanis remained there for 5 years. And the Pakistani peacekeepers were one who were also involved in rescuing American Marines. The Americans have made a movie called Black Hawk Down. They have conveniently forgotten that it was the Pakistanis who rescued them. So we teach peacekeeping, and peace is, although I am a soldier, but we try to teach peace. So we go to the next slide, please. Yeah. So Middle East, as we know, is known for three things. It has a surfeit of resources, it has a surfeit of religions, and it has a surfeit of conflicts. A few years ago, I met a person from the US State Department, and he was working on the Middle East desk. And I asked him, what was the situation in peace? What was the situation in Middle East? And he said, Middle East has been in turmoil for the last 3,000 years. Perhaps there was a bit of truth in that, but Americans are also responsible for whatever is happening. And before them, the great colonial powers. We all know about the secret Sykes-Picot Accord, according to which the French and the British divided the Middle East into their own spheres of influence. Even now, French have a great deal of influence in Lebanon. The Americans have the influence in the Arab countries, particularly which are resource rich, like the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and UAE and other countries. And this has created a lot of conflict in the area. So three things which whenever we talk of Middle East: resources, religions, and conflicts. Can I have the next slide, please? So I think this is something academic. Most of you would be knowing in it, at least this would be no news to the panelists, but perhaps the other people who are listening into the live broadcast. Middle East has roughly 9 million square kilometers of area. It comprises 17 countries located in Western Asia, and depending on how you look at it, in North Africa. Some people also include Pakistan and the greater Middle East. It depends on your perception. It extends from the eastern Mediterranean coast of Turkey and Syria through the deserts of Iraq and Arabia, and to the east through Iran to the Caspian Sea, the Caucasus, and the Black Sea. And Ambassador Sajjadpour was at great pains to explain to us the central location of Iran, how it borders on various countries. It includes Egypt and, by some accounts, Arab North Africa, the Maghreb as we call it. So it has a population of 411 million people. It includes Arabs, Persians, Turks, Kurds, Armenians, and Jews. The religions, and they have major Abrahamic religions, that is Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. That is not to say that there are minor religions also in the area. But as Ambassador Sajjadpour pointed out, there is a lot of emphasis on Abrahamic religion. Not only there is the evangelical flavor to it, the American presidents particularly like to appeal to the religious constituency, the Bible Belt, but also the word Abrahamic religion, the Abrahamic Accords, which has been mentioned in these particular peace accords, is also meant to appeal to the Muslim populations. So we know the conflicts in the area. There is this perpetual Arab-Israel conflict since the beginning of the 20th century or early part of the 20th century. We know that the Europeans and the Americans wanted the Jews to go back from their areas and get settled in Palestine. They did that, usurped the area. There have been perpetual conflict over there. We know about the Yemen civil war. The entire area is polarized because of the Yemen civil war. Stakeholders wanted to drag Pakistan also into this war, but mercifully Pakistan decided to keep away from it because they thought that we had no stakes in this. This is somebody else's war. We know about the Syrian civil war. It continues, and it beats me. Why don't we send UN peacekeepers over there? There was, to begin with, some UN presence over there, but again, peacekeeping also is something which happens when the P5, or more particularly the US, wants it to happen. Otherwise, peacekeepers don't go to places where the big five don't want the peacekeepers to go. Then there's a Turkey-Kurd conflict. There is the Arab-Iranian tensions. This is a fact of life, whether we agree to it or not. That area has been witnessing Arab-Iranian tensions for a very long time. Next slide, please. Can you move over to the next slide, please, or should I? So you have not enabled me to move, manipulate my slides. So whoever is working on my presentation at your end, can you move on to the next slide, please? Yeah. No, you can't. So I'll try again. No, it's not enabled. So since my PowerPoint presentation is not available to you, I'll just speak extempore for some time. Who are the winners or losers over here? The topic that I was given was about whether the Palestinians or Iranians are losers in this entire context. So again, it depends on how you look at it. Personally, from my point of view, this could be a ploy for the American elections. Come election season, and the American presidential candidates who go to all sorts of gimmicks to impress their local constituency to vote for them. But personally, in my opinion, the Americans are not much bothered about what is happening in Palestine, though I know if you watch the mainstream or even the alternate American media, they are preoccupied with what is happening in Middle East. But it is mostly because of their concerns for Israel. It's not for their concerns for Palestinians by any chance. And I think Ambassador Sajjadpour did point out that Jimmy Carter, because he showed some kind of leniency towards the Palestinians, he was ousted. I think one reason that he did not win the elections was also because he was not able to rescue the people held hostage in the Tehran embassy, and the Desert 1, Desert 2 military adventure to prize them away was a great deal of fiasco. So no, I don't think this is meant for, or yes, it might in some ways be for direct towards the American voters. But I think the American voters would be, like any voters anywhere else in the world, would be more interested in things that matter to them. Perhaps they'll be more interested in Afghanistan because Their troops are still there, although Trump wants them to be withdrawn from them at a very fast pace. There are conflicting signals coming out. Their Chairman, Joint Chief of Staff, General Milley, is saying that they will be coming out, bulk of them would be coming out early 2021. And okay, I'm back. So with technology is far. I know with problems with technology. I've been teaching my students online for the last 6 months, and I know it has been problematic. So you lose your scripts. You have to make do with alternate strategies. Okay, so in my point of view, it is not about American elections. In some peripheral way, it might be, but the constant here is peace in Middle East. And whether these accords, you call them whatever you want, Abrahamic Accords or whatever, the constant is peace in the Middle East. So whether these accords or agreements will bring about peace in the area or not, that is the moot question. That is the larger framework of this discussion. And the independent variable is the peace deal between Israel and, at the moment, Bahrain and UAE. But as other panelists have spoken out, there are other Arab states who will fall in line. Oman could be one. Sudan is resisting. Sudan has said that the current transitional government head has said that it is not within his mandate to strike a peace deal with Israel, but other Arab states might fall in line. So the dependent variable on this in this entire scheme of things is the Palestinians and the Iranians. So whether they are going to gain from this entire process or they're going to lose from it, that is the subject of discussion. The next slide, please. Yeah, so this is how I see it. There's a dove of peace, and in between you see Israel, and on both sides you see, on one side you see the Arab states who have good relations with America, and by extension good relations with Israel also, and I've included the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia also. They have good relations with the United States. We have very good relations with the United States of America. Whether we would recognize Israel, I don't think we will. And in the bottom, we see a map of, basically I wanted to show Iran and Palestine. Iran, as Master Manpour very correctly, Sajjadpour, sorry, I beg your pardon, very correctly pointed out, it's a huge country. It's a big country. It borders on many areas of the Middle East, and even in some ways it is also now, I think, involved in whatever is going on in the fighting between Armenia and Azerbaijan, the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. So, so this is the dove of peace. Whether this will actually bring about peace in Arab or Middle East, which includes also Iran and Turkey and Central Asian countries, and perhaps by extension Pakistan also. Next slide, please. Bushra. So this is again a map. I am fascinated by maps because as an army man, we were taught to look at the maps and draw conclusions. So this is a map shows Iran on the east side, and on the western side it shows Palestine, and there's a squiggly line around it. Because most maps don't write, the maps openly available don't show Palestine, they show Israel. But as far as I'm concerned, this is the Palestinian area. So Iran and Palestine do not have borders with each other, but they have very strong relationship. And although the two areas represent different sects of Islam, one is I do not subscribe to that, but anyhow, it's a state which believes in Shia Islam, and the Palestinians are mostly Sunnis, but they have very good relationship. Particularly Iran and Hamas have very, very cordial relationship, and also Iran has good relationship with Hezbollah in Beirut. So you see a part of Lebanon also in the squiggly line drawn around this map. So next slide, please. So I would like to go back to to one of the peace deals, one very famous peace deal which happened in our lifetimes, which was the peace deal between Egypt and Israel after the 1973 Arab-Israel war. I was a young captain and I witnessed the war. I was very impressed with the way the Egyptians were able to break the myth of the Israelis being invincible. But Anwar Sadat had a larger political agenda. He struck his own peace with Israel. So what were the gains? Is Sadat, along with Begin, won the Nobel Peace Prize, if you can call it a gain. It was a personal gain for these two gentlemen. Egypt got back the Sinai Peninsula. It was a huge gain for Egypt. And Egypt became a strategic partner of the US. It remains a strategic partner of the US. What were the losses? Sadat as well as Begin both were assassinated. The public could not gulp this peace accord, particularly in what happened in Egypt. You know, Lieutenant Islamabad killed Sadat while a military parade was being conducted. Egypt suffered from short-term isolation from the Arab and Islamic world, and I think Pakistan at that time played a leading role in getting Egypt back to the at least into the OIC. The Arabs also ultimately took them back. And the only loser, if you can call it a loser, was Syria, who was left all on its own to fend for itself. Next slide, please. Not immediately because of the what happened, Camp David Accord, etc. But the Oslo process was also, by extension, something which happened because Egypt made peace with Israel. So there was these Oslo processes which started after secret negotiation in Oslo. And in this, PLO and Israel recognize each other as the representative of the Palestinian people. And there was an acceptance that PLO exists. And it was aimed at achieving peace treaty based on UN Security Council resolutions 242 and 338. And it was meant to fulfill the right of Palestinian people to self-determination. And there were Oslo Accords 1 and Oslo Accords 2, 1993, 1995. Nothing happened. Nothing happened because of these accords, but there was a great deal of excitement once upon a time that perhaps the possibility of two states could exist, that Palestinians and Israelis could perhaps exist at two autonomous states within this region. Next slide, please. The most important questions that came out of it related to the borders of Israel and Palestine. Israeli settlements, again, after Trump came into power, he recognized the Israeli settlements in the Golan area, and he took his embassy to Jerusalem. Trump has actually demolished it. But the Oslo Accords talked about how to reduce or possible reduction of Israeli military presence, and how the Palestinians could define their own state and what was their right, or perhaps it would have given them the right to return to that land. And as Sajjadpour Sahab has correctly pointed out, this does not mean the original Palestinians, perhaps those are long dead and buried. It means grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Next slide, please. So we know that UAE and Bahrain have signed this peace agreement to seek security. So to seek security from Israel, I think it is all about security. It's got nothing to do with Prophet Abraham. They want security. They already have security. They are buying like crazy from the Americans, or Americans are selling them. I don't know why they're selling them the F-35s now when the problem of security has been solved. Why should they be buying air defense equipment? Why should they be buying all this high tech? I mean, if I was an Arab, I would have said that now that I've struck this accord, why should I buy all this costly hardware from you? But this is a security agreement, nothing to do with religion. Iran will be more isolated and Israel will be more secure in the Middle East. Iranians may say that no, we would not be isolated, but Palestine would be neglected. Again, a matter of perception, neglected. Yeah, okay, maybe perhaps. Next slide, please. These could be the possible consequences that the more Arab states will make peace with Israel. There can be an Arab Spring 2.0. if the local populations are upset with what is happening, and the Palestinians, as it has been already pointed out, they have called it the great sellout. This is been a betrayal that the Palestinians have made no bones about it. Neither the Hamas nor Mahmoud Abbas, they've said that this is a great betrayal. They've sold out on us. The Arab brothers have sold out on us. So Iran and Palestine will draw closer. So this is already happening. This is nothing new. We see Iran and Palestine drawing closer. Next, please. So who wins or loses if there's an Arab-Israel peace in the Middle East? So these are the possible three scenarios that come into my mind. I think everybody wins if there is a just and equitable peace in the Middle East, and there can only be a just and equitable peace in Palestine if the Palestinians are recognized as a legitimate sovereign state, if they are given a seat in the United Nations organization, not just an observer status, a seat in the UN, recognition by all countries of the world. That could be the best possible solution, whether you call it through Abrahamic Accords or any other accord. It's peace, whether it's peace in the South Asia, unless the Kashmiris are given the right to decide for themselves, unless the Palestinians are given the right to decide for themselves, there can be no peace. Scenario two, there will be some winners and some losers if peace is at the expense of one or two nations of the people. So some win, some lose. And scenario three, everyone will lose if peace is just for one entity. If it's just for the protection of Israel, I don't think anybody would be a victor. But this is something that the United States of America is trying to do. This is the Trump or Jared Kushner formula. So one doesn't have to be upset about it. You can have parallel initiatives. Pakistan has tried to bring about peace in Iran, in the Middle East. Even Pakistan has tried to patch up between the Iranians and the Arabs. Pakistan has had no significant progress at the moment. But there could be initiatives by other countries. There's so many people in larger Middle East. It's not just a few nations. So I think there is a need that everybody is involved in the peace process, not just a few countries at the expense of a few countries. Next, please. So thank you for sorry for the extra S. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for giving me time, and I will open for questions. Thank you very much, Pakistan Institute for International Affairs. It's over from me. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yamin. Thank you very much. Can you hear me, Dr. Yamin? Can you hear me, Dr. Yamin?
Yes, I can hear you. Sorry, I muted myself. I can hear you.
Thank you very much indeed for your presentation.
Thank you very much.
And now I will open the floor for question and answer. I hope that our young researchers have some questions also, but whoever wants to come in may come in now.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you, our distinguished guests and speakers, for such a beautiful presentation. I, on behalf of other attendees, am asking questions from you all. The first question I'm going to ask is, Pakistan has always refrained from recognizing Israel. One of the reasons being Arab countries' influence and the pressure of elements at home, of religious elements at home. After the Abraham Accord, however, where UAE and Bahrain have already recognized Israel and other Arab countries are potentially in queue, do you think these developments are going to change Pakistan's perspective towards Israel? I want all of you to answer the question, please. First, Hasan, Habib, Sahab, you want to answer this question?
Yeah, thank you very much. But I think recognition by any state will not matter in our stand. We are a sovereign state and we have a declared policy on Israel. We don't have any border dispute with Israel. We don't have any trade dispute with Israel, but our dispute with Israel is on principles. So that never changed when Egypt recognized Israel, and Jordan joined it, and excuse me, more will join, but that will not change our stance because we don't have a direct dispute. We have a principled stand which is focused on the Palestinian issue. This accord does not change anything uh, positive, at least on the Palestinian issue. So I don't think our elements, political or religious, will agree to our going towards the recognition of Israel. Thank you very much.
डॉक्टर यामीन आप बोलेंगे?
जी जी बिल्कुल 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 बोलूँगा। मैं बिल्कुल मुकम्मल इत्तेफाक करता हूँ एम्बेसडर हबीब साहब से। देयर इज़ नो पॉइंट इन रिकग्नाइजिंग Israel. Israel, we may not have any disputes with Israel, but we don't have any conflation of interests with Israel also. Israel is one of the biggest defense partners with India. They are selling them all kinds of military hardware, which includes very sophisticated drones, which the Indians are using against us on the line of control. There was one big plan to actually sabotage our nuclear explosions in 1998. It created a great scare in Pakistan. The Israelis, in league with the Indian Air Force, were about to take off from Jaipur to attack Pakistan. So I don't want us to be fighting against Israel, and we state very clearly, and I echo what Ambassador Hasan Habib Sahab was saying. We never say that our nuclear bomb is meant for Israel. We say that our nuclear bomb is principally India-centric, and we have an existential threat from India. So our nuclear deterrence is for Israel, against India. But again, principled stand, as Hasan Habib was saying, principled stand. The Palestinians are being oppressed, so are the Kashmiris. So if we let down the Palestinians, do we expect everybody else to let down the Kashmiris? I think there are parallels, and I think Iran is one country, very few countries now who talk about Kashmir. If we recognize Israel, we will be part of this great betrayal, will be part of the great sellout. Not only will the domestic audience not accept it, this would be a political harakiri for anybody who is in the position of authority. There is no point in recognizing Israel. There's no point in fighting Israel also, but please do understand this is not in our interest to Israel at the moment, unless they agree to give the Palestinians their right to rule, to be a sovereign state. I want, personally, as a citizen, as a human being, I want oppression to end in Palestine before recognizing Israel, if it happens at any time in my lifetime. Thank you very much.
Dr. Sajjadpour, would you like to say something on this issue? No? Okay. Ask the next question.
Okay, the next question is, do you think that the current unipolar world is going to become a bipolar or even a multipolar one, keeping in view the regional developments, specifically when we see Russia, China, and Iran's mutual engagements? Can they form a new bloc?
Who would like to respond? Dr. Sajjadpour?
I think it's a good question. Fundamental change on the global level during the last 25 years. And I think in this fundamental change, what you can see is uh, new centers of power are emerging. The vertical outlook of the world that was based on superpowers hierarchy is changing. Now you have a horizontal, let's say, a scope which should be also kept in mind. I mean, regional players matter, even small states matter, different regions matter. So if you look at all this, you see the third point, which is a tension between the old system and the new system. And the tension, I think, what we call the era of transition. The transition is from a very Eurocentric world. Of course, US is part of the Eurocentric world, to a more Asian centric in a way. So there is a rise of China. You have US Chinese as the most fundamental issue in international politics, I have to say. And I think in this regard, the US has a deep problematic in exerting its hegemony globally. And American election even is about this quality of global leadership of United States in a way. But finally, I think the third point is, of course, the concept of blocs and alliances also changing. The concept is changing in different ways. I think we are not going to have the same blocs as we had in the during the Cold War, but we have issue-oriented cooperations. We have on significant regional dimensions, and look at what happens on the bloc that you say, Iran, China, Russia. I think it cannot be a bloc as we had in the Cold War, but they have the shared principle of rejecting American hegemony in some areas, but they have different quality of relationship with the United States. So the world is changing. Actually, Dr. Zarif, our foreign minister, and me and another colleague have authored a book. Of course, we did it before let's say, ministership of Dr. Zarif. It is exactly on the same subject, and we call it post-Western world. We use the word before others, you know, and of course it's in Persian. I hope you can read it through some colleagues and see. And I think here the role of Pakistan, the role of Iran, the role of these regional players matter more than before. We shouldn't be looked just from a bipolar system. We matter in this changing world. This is why I think Pakistani-Chinese relationship is a very important issue. I follow it for my academic, let's say, plans, and I think it's one of the features of how the world is changing.
यामिन साहब, आप कुछ कहना चाहेंगे?
जी, मैं कहना चाहता हूँ, आप
जी फरमाइए.
I fully agree with Dr. Sajjadpour that the world is changing. There is no two opinion about it. All the conflicts going around in the globe is an effort to keep the world unipolar. If we look in the history, Thucydides has very clearly said that when a power is going out or losing its validity, then there are too many of conflicts. So what conflicts we see around us is a very, very clear sign that the world is moving away from unipolar towards bipolar or multipolar. That is yet to be decided. But all the movement that we see, the conflicts, the alliances breaking, new groups, I may be careful, like Dr. Sajjadpour, not to use the word alliances or groupings, but new thought systems or new ideas that are floating around all indicate that we are moving away from a unipolar world. Now, obviously President Trump would try to keep it unipolar, but because that suits him, or the US will try to delay it. But the predictions are already there. I would like to quote Rise and Fall of Great Power by Paul Kennedy, which came in 1988 probably. It had predicted America going out as the sole superpower. So it was 1988 when Paul Kennedy says 25. But if you see the wars in the Middle East, if you see the wars in Africa or Asia, all these are efforts to keep the US primacy. Now, there is a role about China, there is a role of Russia, and role of all regional countries, Iran, Pakistan, India. India is, of course, now aligned with US, so they will not be part of our struggle. But all the countries which are neutral should now try not to keep the movement to a unipolar world, but to try to move towards a bipolar and a multipolar world. Thank you.
Okay. Yamin sir?
जी बिल्कुल सही. I agree with the other two panelists. We are witnessing a change in national dynamics. United States of America is a receding power. They know in their hearts of hearts that they cannot be the preeminent power in this world for a very long time. China is in ascendance, and it is because of their economic might, the growing economic mights, and also the edge that they are trying to get in technology. Technology is one area where the Americans have a huge edge. They own the internet, whether they say that internet is for everybody or not. They own the internet. What we are seeing right now is because of American technology, but the Chinese are making inroads. Huawei, 5G, all that stuff. We know that they are trying to replace America, or if not replace it, trying to find a place for them in the sun. So America is the receding power. Historically, if we see that great powers remain in positions of world supremacy for maybe centuries, 1 century, 2 centuries, 3 centuries, 4 centuries, 5 centuries, but they can go out earlier. Also, Mongols did not last for many centuries. I don't say that the US would become a nonentity in maybe 50 years, 100. No, that won't happen. But the United States of America has serious challenges. And there are, you call it whatever, regional groupings, blocks or alliances. I think the BRI, the connectivity thing that the Chinese are investing it is going to pay its dividends in another 10, 20, 30, 40 years. The Chinese influence is going to grow. They're going to connect Asia and Africa at the expense of other powers, at the expense of the United States of America. So nothing new in it. Rise and fall of nation. Paul Kennedy might have said that, but we all know that it happens. You rise one day, you fall one day, or you decline one day. You may not disappear from the world. So I don't think America is going to disappear. It's going to remain a major power. It's a major military power. It has got 7 fleets. It can fight 2 full-fledged wars at any given time. So you cannot just rule out the United States of America, but there are serious threats. It is not going to remain alone as a monolith. It is going to be opposed, or at least there will be competitors like China, Russia, and even smaller countries. That's my opinion about it. Thank you very much.
Do you have another question?
Yes, we have a few more questions if you allow.
Good. We'll go on till the evening. Come on.
Okay.
Next question.
Thank you, ma'am. The next question is, what do you think will be the consequence of accord on Pakistan, Iran, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia?
Consequence of what? Sorry, I didn't follow.
I'm repeating. What do you think will be the consequence of accord for Pakistan, Iran, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia?
The consequence of this accord.
Of this accord, Abraham Accords. For these 4 mentioned countries, Pakistan, Iran, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia.
Ambassadors, would you like to answer, Excellency?
I think on Iran.
Ma'am? Yes, please.
After you.
So, you know, Iran's position is very clear. Pakistan, again, is very clear on Palestinian issue that we will not recognize Palestine till there is a settlement of the issue. So it will be, it remains Turkey. Turkey is also opposed to the accord, but that leaves mainly Saudi Arab. Saudi Arab may have issues, but they have a very, how to say, culture. They have a culture where the conservative forces will be hindering its joining the Israeli recognition bloc. So for Pakistan, Iran, and Saudi Arabia, to a greater extent, its own people will not let it happen. With Turkey also, we are seeing a very big change in Turkey, and Turkey is not allowing Israel the freedom of joining the recognition and the defense working that they had initially. So I think for all these four countries, recognizing or being soft, going soft on Israel is not an option. We see there is a soft stance from Mohammed bin Salman, Crown Prince, but King remains opposed to the recognition of Israel. So to simplify, what I wanted to say was that all four countries will stay away from a similar agreement, the Abrahamic Accord. Thank you.
Excellency?
Thank you. I think it's a good question, of course, on this issue. We can talk from different perspectives, but I think Iranian position has been always a principled one on the issue of Palestinian, and it cannot be ignored that consistently Iran has been for the right of Palestinians, and I think nobody can ignore this right. All, I think, artificial, huge, big events, you know, ceremonies, and so on and so on and so forth, cannot ignore that there is a structural, fundamental problem, and that is the Palestinian. Let me brief you on a very important historical fact. When it was in 1948, the issue of Palestine was referred to United Nations by United Kingdom because it was the mandate power, and it declared that I cannot really control anymore this area. It's still the UN decide. In the UN, in the United Nations, there was a committee organized by General Assembly. Iran was a member of that committee. Then they reviewed the case, and there was a report, and there was two views in that committee. One was on minority, which Iran belonged to, and one was, it was 1948, and one, the majority. The majority voted for two-state solution, but Iran said it's not the solution. And then, if you know the multilateral language, there is an expression called explanation of the vote after the vote. When the vote was taken, Iranian representative took the floor, and he had a very interesting statement, which I think is valid till today. And it was in 1948, and he was an old man, of course, with wisdom. He said, what Iran voted for, we are not against Jews, because Jews have been living in Iran for 25 centuries. And with Arabs, we are religious believers. So what we did is vote against two-state solution because of the Charter of the United Nations, which is international peace and security. And he calls the members who voted for two-state, and he said, what you voted today is not going to solve issues in the region. It's going to create problems for regional peace and security, and even beyond, for international peace and security. And I think he is right, because it was a fabrication. It was an artificial entity, I have to say, not to really take into account the realities of, and I think realities of the situation. I think the principal position of Iran is very interesting in that way, that you cannot artificially change realities on the ground. and the Palestinian issue is at the core. So I think our position would be more strengthening. Yes, there may be some flights between this city and that city, but I think on a more broader scope, this principle position, because it is based on reality, it's not on artificial, let's say it is. And I think on the other countries, Turkey is taking a very interesting position. Pakistani position was cleared by my colleagues in this webinar. But I think Saudi Arabia is under pressure of United States. However, it is also under pressure domestically. So this is why you have fluctuations. And of course, there is diversity inside Saudi Arabia. But I would end by saying that these meetings, accords, going and coming would not solve realities on the ground, and it cannot artificially change the situation, as my colleagues refer to other crises in the region. You cannot forget them. They are there. There should be a solution, and the solution is that the rights of Palestinians should be the key, the pivotal core value in all these processes. Thank you.
If I'm permitted to say something.
Yes, certainly.
So I think pressure on Pakistan can only happen in one instance, and God forbid, hypothetically speaking, if this Kingdom of Saudi Arabia recognizes Israel, then there'll be pressure on Pakistan. Otherwise, I don't think minor kingdoms, fiefdoms, sheikdoms recognize Israel. I don't think it will make a lot of pressure on Pakistan. That's my only point. Thank you very much.
There is a question here I have it on the screen. This is addressed to Brigadier Tughral. In my opinion, Arabs have always been at a disadvantage due to reliance on the US-led West. Iran is under no condition a loser. Arab states have lost their credibility among the Muslim world amidst disagreements with Israel. And this is a question from Mr. Ahmed Raza. Would you like to say something?
Yeah, I could. Yeah, sure. Mr. Ahmed Raza, it's a very good question, and I would tend to agree with you. Right, Arabs have lost credibility, but when you say Arabs, it's a blanket term. You see, Arabs are not just a few monarchs or a few heads of states. Arabs are Arabs. Like you cannot say Pakistanis because one government says one thing or the other government says the other thing. I have a letter that my father wrote. He was an Air Force officer, and in 1973 war, he said that I want to go and fight for the Arab for the Muslim cause. He was not fighting for Arabs. He actually went to Syria as part of the Pakistani Air Force delegation. So it was not the Arab cause. We had our sympathies with the Muslims, with the Palestinians, wherever they are, irrespective of color, caste, or I would not say creed, because we believe in one religion. So I think I agree with you. Yes, losers and winners is how you perceive things. So if you think that Iran is not a loser, then Iran is not a loser. What can I say? No, I totally agree with you. Thank you very much for putting up a very good question, Mr. Amathas.
Bushra, do you have another question?
Yes, ma'am. I have a few more, if you allow.
A few more. We have to wind up also.
All right. It's going to be the last one then.
Okay. No, you can ask two and then I'll wind up. Okay.
Okay, ma'am. Okay, my next question is, how do you visualize Pakistan-Iran relations in the post-Abraham Accord?
Oh, I don't think there'll be any difference.
Ma'am, shall I try before Ambassador Sajjadpour?
Yes, yes, please.
I have in fact privately also replied to that question to Ahmed Raza Sahab.
Okay.
I have served in Iran, and in addition to my Chinese, I understand and speak a bit of Persian also, just because I think Persian is to us as important as Urdu. Having said so, and living in Iran and Pakistan and around the world, Pakistan and Iran have no option but to remain good friends. That is the punchline that I have. We cannot think of any situation, direct, indirect, or by any third force, that we have to choose another course with Iran. That is my humble submission, and that is, I think, the crux of my experience of so many years.
Can I also answer? I think with regard to this question, first of all, there is a very good structural base for Iran and Pakistan relationship. I think structurally it is a solid relationship. When I say structurally, I mean there is no, let's say, imprint of these fluctuations that two small states, in the Persian Gulf did so and so. I think it is a very structural relationship, and it's one of the most important relations in the region, and maybe globally, that has remained constantly friendly for the last 75 years. And it is a very unique example, and I have to mention it. There may be some pronouncements here in that press or that press, but I think structurally it is so good, and we have to appreciate it. The second point is the impact of third parties on our bilateral relationship has always been either non-existent or minimal. There had been pushes by third parties, I cannot ignore it, to change, but they cannot change the structure. And I think that's very important. The third point is that don't take this accord that, with, let's say, such significant of regional nature. No, I think they are not, these accords, whatever they want to call it. They cannot even shape a new reality in their own setting. They would create problems for them. Look at Bahrain. What happened after Bahrain's signing this accord? There were demonstrations in Bahrain. So the legitimacy of the government was challenged by its own citizens on this. So don't take this accord as that game changer. They are not that, let's say, important at all to affect such a fundamental relationship as Pakistan and Iran. And I'm really telling this because of my belief, as well as what I see on the scene in Iranian-Pakistan relationship. And I hope for better interaction between Iran and Pakistan, especially on this think tanking level. And I think this is what I enjoy more. And I hope Ambassador Dr. Masoom Hasan would work for more webinars. Maybe we have to plan a webinar between our Institute for International Political Studies, and Pakistani Institute of International Affairs. I will follow, my colleagues will follow, and I think the more we take these questions, the better it is. So I'm very confident of this relationship.
Bushra Batul, do you have a last question?
Okay, ma'am, this is going to be the last one.
Last one, please.
Yes, the question is, as we see, two Arab countries have already recognized Israel, and there are potentially a few more in queue. Do you think there might be a division of Muslim world based on their positions on Israel?
That's very interesting.
Can I answer shortly,
yes.
very quick?
Yeah.
Yes,
I think, first of all, there are not that many in queue to establish. They are under pressure.
Yes, that's true.
That's very important. Don't think that it is a willing, let's say, project. It is a pressure project. And the more they depend on United States, they are eager to do so. They are obliged to do so. So I think the fundamental assumption in the question should be somehow revisited. But I think all Muslims, because they are human beings, they care about Palestinians. And I think it is their heart when you see somebody is suffering. And I think here the position of Arab states, not all of them, some of the Arab states maybe is not that significant that you have to really look on. And one more fact, of course, I respect Arabs as Professor Yamin respected Arabs, or so many you cannot just pinpoint one. But you know, the Muslim world is not just about Arabs.
Yes.
Actually, most of the Muslim world are not Arabs. And Arabs, while we respect them, while we respect Arabic, we have to keep in mind that Islam is a universal religion, and it belongs not to any specific nationality or civilization. It is cross. Look at Pakistan. Pakistan is a Muslim country on always as a spokesman for Muslim cause, but it's not Arab. So I think look at the realities of the Muslim world and Muslims at large, and you see the question maybe reshaped.
Yamin Sahab,
Ma'am, can I say something?
yes, certainly.
Ma'am, can I say?
Yes.
I fully agree with Ambassador Sajjadpour that the Islam or the Muslim Ummah is not confined to the Arab lands. And also to the fact that following the accord, and if there is a feeling that the Arabs are impacting the Muslim unity, there could be informal arrangements. Like there could be conferences, there could be meetings by the non-Arab Muslims to at least formulate their policy or their reaction. So on one hand, we respect Arabs as Arabs and not fully comply with their positions on recognizing Israel or not recognizing Israel or working with whatever group. It is very natural that if the Muslim Ummah will meet, there will be grouping or subgrouping, and that is natural. That it is the right of any sovereign country to consult or to work with any other sovereign country. So the question, which is very tricky, asked that whether we will be part of grouping or not, or subgrouping, but it remains that this group will not be against Islam. See, we have a very clear understanding that if there will be any group or subgroup or organization by non-Arab countries, it will never be against the Arabs or against the Islamic unity. So for me, it is very clear that if need be, we can form a group or a conference or whatever, but it will never be at the cost of Islamic Ummah unity and against the Palestinian cause. So if there are these two guiding principles, yes, there is no harm in having more subgroups or groups or conferences or meetings or any other mechanism to raise our voices for the Islamic causes. Thank you very much.
यामीन साहब आप कुछ कहिएगा?
जी जी बिल्कुल शुक्रिया बहुत बहुत मैं ये कहना चाहूँगा कि पाकिस्तान occupies a unique position in the Islamic world. It is not an Arab country, as Ambassador Sajjadpour very correctly pointed out. We are perhaps, depending on where you live, maybe more Indian and less Arab, if we go by DNA or ethnicity. So I think the current Muslim leadership hierarchy is dissolving. The Arabs are losing out on the leadership role that they have had for such a long time. Pakistan has always held the interest of Ummah dear to their heart. I think it is only Pakistan among all countries of the world who have been talking about Ummah, and we have got a severe battering for it also. And people have been telling us, you bloody idiots, why are you talking about Ummah? The Ummah is not worried about you. Nobody talks about Kashmir. Why? What is your problem? So I think Pakistan occupies a very unique position. We are neutral in this debate. We should make a position for ourselves. I think our diplomats should propose to the government that they should play a very meaningful role in uniting the Islamic world. It is polarized, if not outright divided. These accords have had their effect. I would not debate that. It has its effect. So I think Pakistan should play a meaningful role in uniting it, and in some way playing a meaningful role in evolving a new Muslim hierarchy. OIC is dead. Maybe that Malaysia, Turkey, Pakistan formula might still might not be dead. Perhaps we can revive it. Thank you very much.
Well, if there are no other questions, I would like to wrap up. And I must say that I'm very highly impressed by the input from all three panelists. And also, Bushra, thank you for the list of questions which you and your colleagues have drawn up. I would like to share a few of my concerns which have evolved while I have listened to these distinguished panelists. In the first place, we call this Abraham Accords really to give it some kind of religious sanctity, biblical religious sanctity, which the makers of these accords think will ring better with the people of these areas to which they are related. The second question which comes to my mind is Iran a threat? Is there really great fear among its neighbors about Iran? Whereas, as His Excellency said, Iran is rising, and when there is a power which rises in a particular region, there are concerns. But Iran is not an ordinary country. As His Excellency has pointed out, it is located probably even more strategically than Pakistan is. We often talk about Pakistan's strategic importance. It is at a crossroads of so many regions. But His Excellency has pointed out the diverse regional implications of Iran's own location. And this fear of Iran is also, I think, a manufactured fear to a very great extent, to give some kind of legitimacy to these accords which are being worked out between Israel and some of its Arab neighbors. You see, as I look at Iran, Iran is large in landmass. Iran has a large population, a much larger population than any of these little, kingdoms or fiefdoms. There is no comparison. Iran has a very high technological achievement. Iran has a very highly educated population. That is also important, that it doesn't have an uneducated population. Its literacy levels are far, far higher than those of many countries, especially higher than Pakistan. And we have had a strategic, beyond that, a friendly relation with Iran from the time I remember it, from the time that I was a little girl. And the first time that the Shah of Iran came to Pakistan, and I was a little girl, and I was taken out with my class fellows to the all of us little children standing on the streets waving Irani flags. So I have that kind of memory about Iran. And the other thing is that Iran has stood by us through all our tribulations. We have had ups and downs in our country, so many, we even lost half our country in 1971. And Iran has also had its ups and downs. It's had changes in its regimes. But that has not changed in any way its status in the region or even in the world. And so far as a unipolar state is country is concerned, a unipolar power, which we have been saying for the last 2 decades, I think. If you look at history in perspective, these unipolar powers haven't always lasted. And we must also take a fair view of what is happening in the United States of America today. The United States of America is a highly divisive country in which there are divisions of all kinds, in which there is so much violence. It preaches peace to the rest of the world, but there's so much violence within its own borders. And there are also lately this thing that has come up because of race relations in the United States. And at the international level, the United States has beaten a retreat on many fronts. It has moved out of so many, no longer funding them. And I think that most, as very rightly pointed out, these accords of Israel are very much a United States elections gambit. There's going to be an election within a few weeks. And the power which has worked towards these arrangements with Israel is going to tout that as a great achievement. But we still have to see what happens in the US elections. Finally, I would like to say something about Palestine. You know, Pakistan's allegiance or adherence to the cause of Palestine goes back even before Pakistan was formed or established. If you look at the resolutions of the All India Muslim League under Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah, you will see that in all those meetings, these annual meetings of the Muslim League, there were resolutions about Palestine. Palestine has been a cause célèbre for the Muslim leadership in Pakistan. And in 1948, His Excellency has referred to 1948. In 1948, the Pakistan delegation played a most forceful role in the debates on Palestine. If you pick them up, Zafrullah Khan was our foreign minister at that time. He was much acclaimed as a diplomat and also as a consensus builder. And our debates, the participation in our debates at that time was all in favor of Palestine. So there should be no betrayal of the Palestinian cause. I cannot conceive of any government in Pakistan betraying that cause. They can do it in other countries, maybe in Qatar, maybe in Bahrain, but I don't think that with such a large population in Pakistan, we are not a small country, we are 250 million people. With such a large population in Pakistan, it will be possible, at least in the near future, for any government to think of accepting the state of Palestine. Now, so much as far as the Muslim world is concerned, you know, I think we do tend to stop the Muslim world at Pakistan because we should look eastwards also. There is Bangladesh, there is Malaysia, there is Indonesia. But in most of our discourses, these countries don't figure. So as Dr. Sajjadpour has said, after all, Muslims are not only Arabs, they're also Southeast Asians, they're also Bengalis, they're also the Muslims of India. India has a very large Muslim population, which is under great stress and is getting a great beating these days at the hands of the Modi government. But they are there and they have an interest in what is happening in the Middle East. I would like to thank all of you, and I want to thank especially Sajjadpour Sahib, because you came in on us and you gave us, we are honored by your presence, and I will take you up on this suggestion that your institute and us should have a webinar together. We look forward to that. But above all that, since every one of you has mentioned the library of the institute, I hope that a time will come very soon, we'll be behind this COVID problem, when you will also be able to visit us physically. Thank you very much. I'm very grateful to all of you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am, and thank you, everybody. Thank you, Dr. Sajjadpour.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Ambassador.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Tughral Sahib.
Thank you.
Allah.
Thank you. Walaikum assalam.
Thank you, Bushra, for good questions. Okay. Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Bushra.
Thank you, sir.